If you're like me and you use Suno Studio, but you just want the sound to sound thicker and more dense and like a real song, this video is for you. I'm going to show you how to mix the stems to sound more realistic and more full. Okay, we're going to use Logic Pro because it's the most like full, elaborate suite of plugins I've found as far as a stock DAW. So firstly, before we even get into mixing in the DAW, we have to understand what we actually need to do. So the first thing I'd recommend you guys do is name every single track so that when we create what are called multi-tracks, you know exactly which track is which. Mixing a lot of the time is eaten up by trying to organize things. So you want to make sure you just name stuff for its purpose. Now, once it's named in Suno Studio, let's go to where it says export, go to multi-track. So this will take whether a minute or less than a minute, depends on your actual session. It will separate each track into its own file, and you can manipulate that file in your DAW of choice. All right, so I'm going to wait for this, and we're going to drag these sounds into Logic Pro. All right, guys, that process doesn't take long. I just had to put my son down for a nap. So let's drag these files into Logic Pro. Now, I want to warn people who are new to music production, mixing is not this technically do this thing every single time. It's different every single song. I can give you guys a templated format of a way to go about it, but every single song is different. There's no like do this every single time. Okay, so I just want to warn you there because you're going to be looking for the perfect thing, and it is no perfect thing. All right, so firstly, we want to grab the project tempo. It's 91. In the case that we add any time-based effects like delay or reverbs that based around time. So that's the only time we need to worry about BPM when we're mixing. Now, the first thing we want to do is delete the original tracks. That's why we named it, so I know what's what. And what I like to do in Logic Pro is highlight all of the tracks, create a track stack and a summing stack. What this is going to do basically is create what we call a mix bus so that everything goes through this, and I can add effects to everything all at once or individually to each sound. Okay, so the first place I usually attack is the bass and the drums because these are the density things of your song most of the time. So the drums are really easy. This is usually, I apply this all the time to every beat pretty much, is an expander. So this expander is unique because it has what's called a soft clipper inside. So you really don't have to do much. We're just gonna add it on, and it should be set to the right levels here, but let's just double check. So we want this little blue area in the middle to hit somewhere around 3 or less. Okay, we don't want to go past that because then we're just like doing too much. But we just want this thing to bounce up to 3 and then back down. That's all we're trying to do is add what's called dynamic or difference in volume. Let me save this project too. Again, the reason I'm starting with the drums and the bass is because it's like the foundation of a house. You start at the bottom and you work your way up. Because when you start adding harmonics to the bass, for example, you're adding higher frequencies. So my perspective is just start with the bass most of the time and the rhythm, because you're going to end up adding more and more high frequencies, and you're going to have a different amount of high frequencies after you work with these sounds. So you might as well start with the lows. That's my general theory. It's not like a hard rule. So the expander, let's go back to it. See how it's hitting at 3 or less? That's all we want. Now there's some things you just cannot undo in terms of Suno stems. Okay, so if you guys listen closely, you'll hear this like, that's just the nature of the way the audio is generated. You can't really undo that phasing issue. Let me see which track has it. I think it's the drums. See how it goes like just out of nowhere? You can't really fix that. There's no way to fix that in terms of what it's doing. What we could do is lower the amount of change. So in this case, if you did want to fix the high frequencies, which is usually where you can hear the flaw in a lot of these AI generated things, is we need to add a de-esser. So let me see which one this is. So we're going to add a de-esser in Logic Pro. Again, I try to use as many stock plugins as possible. I'll give you guys these project files so you could just use this as a template. But again, every song is different. Okay, so just don't think this is the only way to mix. So what we're trying to do here in theory is rid some of the frequencies, the highs, so that it's just not sticking out as much. We can't remove it completely, but we can at least pull the attention away from it. So let's use this de-esser here. See that it really leans heavily. What we're going to do though is switch this filter mode to a instead of what's called a bandpass filter, where it only pulls down frequencies at this frequency, we want it to pull down everything above this frequency. So we're going to switch it to what's called a high shelf mode. Long story short, this button just, when the high frequencies go above a certain volume, it pulls all of the high frequencies down above this specific point. So we're going to set this to somewhere around 3,000 or higher. And we can lower the threshold if we feel like it's not working hard enough. We can lower what's called the threshold. So here's without it. Now to get more granular, it might help to find this exact frequency. Because this is such a high frequency, it's hard to pinpoint where exactly it is. So this is an EQ that does not come with Logic, but I'm using it because you can visually see a little bit better. So it's actually somewhere around 2K. See, the ear is kind of tricky because you're hearing the high frequencies, but it's not the high frequencies necessarily. Okay, so it's more around 2K than it is around 8K. So in this case, we might switch this mode to what's called a bandpass mode and focus on the 2K area, because this will, and let's make the range wide so it affects a lot of the frequency. Turn it back on. Now this is an extreme amount, as you guys can hear. Here's before. Here's after. But it kills a lot of the high-end details. So this is why I said this is such a fine-tuned way to go about it. So now we're splitting the signal so that we're compressing some and allowing the original through. I think the best way to handle this truly is an EQ, not a de-esser. So in this case, because it's around that 2K range, let's use a channel EQ instead. There's a lot to teach around EQ, dynamic EQs, de-essers, a lot of stuff, but this is such a niche problem. This does not happen a lot. So don't take this as like gospel. We just want to we're going to tame the range so that it does not jump out to our ear as much. Okay, so now, that's a basic solution, is just simply turning it down. All right, I don't want to make that even more complicated than what we have already talked about. So as you guys can see, it gets convoluted pretty fast. So the main thing you guys want to add is an expander. Nextly, I would usually add an EQ to adjust anything that we don't want. Now, in this case, this is a rare thing. I would rarely ever do this, okay? So don't copy this. What we will do, though, which I do a lot, is boost 75 hertz and below. This is the sub to the kick, the density to the kick. So here's before the EQ. Just listen to how thin it sounds and hollow. Here's after. Again, it's like a compromise. It's not perfectly taking that phasey sound out, but it's a compromise to at least allow signal to come through. So listen to that kick. All right, so we're just adjusting tone in that case. Now, after the expander and the compressor, actually, before this, I usually add a compressor. So the reason I'm using this compressor is because of this soft distortion mode. Now, basically say this, it's optional to add a compressor first. Now, the compressor will come before the expander because of the way I'm going to use this compressor. The expander exaggerates the pointiness. The compressor exaggerates the tone of a sound for the most part. Okay, I know I'm generalizing. So we're going to set this to soft distortion. And if it's too aggressive, I'm just going to turn the compressor off because not every song needs a compressor. I like it on the FET mode, FET compressor. It just has more brightness to it. Also, we want to make sure we're mixing with other sounds too. Let's also take off the auto release. So let's just turn the compressor on and off. Here's before. after. See how we lose that punch if we turn the compressor off? Here's before. Just listen to how it hits on the... So once you get the drums sounding realistic, everything else is really just a detail around the drums. I found that the drums are probably the most important thing to mix decently, and everything else just kind of wraps around the drums. So that's why I start with the drums first. Nextly, let's target this bass. Now the main thing we want to do with the bass is just boost the low end. Now every bass is different. That's why I said this is not a cookie cutter mixing video. Some basses have a lot more high frequencies in them just based on the genre. Like an acoustic bass is going to sound different from an electric bass. It's going to sound different from a sub bass in trap music. So it just depends on the use of the 808 or the bass. In this case, we need some of the higher tone so that we hear the tonality in the notes. So we're actually not going to focus on what's called the fundamental frequency. And if I use all these terms and it's super confusing, I break mixing down into bite-sized pieces. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/black. Inside of that is our course bundle. We do this once a year. And there's a course in there called the Mixing Fundamentals. It will give you guys the cookie cutter, start here, do this, bite-size, pieces so you can understand the fundamentals of everything we're doing. Because right now I'm skipping over the fundamentals. So for people who are new, it just sounds like I'm just being confusing. And you're just going to copy what I'm doing anyway. But the thing about mixing is, you can't really just copy and paste it to the next song. You could understand concepts, but the same exact settings aren't going to work every single song. Okay, so firstly, what I like to do with the bass is boost at 75 hertz. So the two magical frequencies for bass for me is 60 hertz and 75 hertz. These just resonate with the body differently. Okay, so that's usually where I target in terms of the low end. Now this bass, what makes it special is that sound, not the boom, boom, boom part, okay? So it's more focused on the boxier part of the sound than the actual sub. But you need that sub to make it sound dense, okay? So we're not trying to boost it to where it sounds like an 808. Like if I exaggerate this, you'll hear what I mean. Now that's a really nice thick bass. Let's see how this sits in the mix though. Now my ear likes this amount of bass. It actually sounds really pleasant to my ear. So I'm going to leave that actually. Now what I would normally do for this bass so that it does not compete with the kick drum is boost what's called the second harmonic and third harmonic. So that instead of 60 and 75, I might focus on, those numbers times 2. So 120 or 150 and whatever the third multiple. So like right here. So in this case, the third harmonic sounds the most musical without sounding muddy to my ear. So we're at 250 hertz. So let's do it before and after. Here's before. We're even watching the level here. It says -6.3. So some people say, oh, it's just louder. Okay, well, we're going to boost it and then pull it back down so we can hear the real difference here. And here's before. Now we're at -3.4. So before we were at what, -6.8, -6.4. And now afterwards we're at 3.7. So the difference between 6.4 and 3.7 is 2.7. So we need to lower this bass down if we want to keep the same perspective, -2.7 dB. So basically now we're only listening to a tonal change and not necessarily a volume change. So now we can A/B this more, I guess, properly. Here's before. So now the bass feels more, it feels more in the pocket and more tight to my ear. It just like latches differently. And I think it's due to that sub. Okay, so now normally what I might do is add a compressor to snap on. Basically, this is confusing. It's not going to sound simple. So we're taking this compressor, we're going to let the bass come through for like a millisecond or so, and then we're going to turn the volume down. That's what we're doing here. So it becomes a little bit sharper. So we could start to shape using a compressor. This might not be necessary though, so I just got to hear it. Now again, instead of adding the expander directly to this track, which I normally could, I'm going to add the expander to the entire mix bus. But this is another plugin you want to look at. Now keep in mind, every sound does not need what's called soft clipping. So you want to make sure this is off if you want to maintain the tone. If you want to change the tone and make it louder, have the soft clip mode on. Because if you have it on, it adds so much more frequency content. Now you're working with a whole new sound, basically. So let's keep that in mind. But it does make it louder. So now our ear, you can't really perceive it, but the ear is moving with the bass instead of just hearing it. Now it's moving with the bass. So the reason we need transient information or pointy information, that's why the drums look pointy. Okay, we need pointy information because the ear knows to move. Okay, in short, that's why we need that. So I like to keep my transient information centered around the drums and anything that accents the drums. In that case, the drums, the percussion, and the bass are transient focused elements. Okay, now we have the bass taken care of. I don't think we need anything else creatively. Now, creatively, you could add a chorus plugin to this type of bass or even a sample delay. But we're getting into creative realms here. This is not a technical thing. But if you wanted to kind of spread the bass to make it wider, you could add a sample delay. I'll exaggerate so you guys can hear the effect. So this basically delays the left ear from the right ear. That's what creates width, is the difference between the two. Or, yeah. So every song doesn't need the style, but I'm just showing you guys. Okay, now let's open this up. It just adds some like 50 Cent type swing to it. I don't know what it does. It just adds a vibe to it. So again, there's no technical reason why we need to do that. It's just a style. Okay. So we took care of the bass. Is there a way to change these track colors? I forget how to do track colors on here. I guess I'll just mark it. I'll just rename it. So we did the bass. We did our drums. These are, again, the meat of the song anyway. Now let's focus on this effects channel. So this effects channel, something that people don't realize with Suno Studio is that Suno Studio will basically add reverb for you. So I've noticed that if you just allow the reverb to be the reverb and don't try to alter it too much, it sounds fine. The moment you start tweaking it, it just sounds out of balance. So any kind of reverbs, I just have to accept that that's what the machine gave us. I don't try to fix the reverbs, because you'll probably cause more problems than solutions. So there's nothing really to do on this channel. Nothing really to add to that one. Let's listen to this guitar, because I don't remember the guitar in this track. Okay, so the guitar, it's already saturated. Now you could probably use a little more distortion, so let's go to the distortion. Let's mess with this distortion too. Click the drop down, go to mix level. This is just adding a little more bite to it so that we can disguise some of that artificial sound when it smears around. See how it already has reverb in it? So we're just kind of reshaping some of the distortion. We can add a compressor. I found that when you have smeary tracks like this guitar, where it's like, it kind of like mask on, mask off type thing. Compressing it does not always make it sound better. It could just make it sound infinitely worse. But what I'll try to do is use a compressor here to keep the volume down on the guitar so that we're not listening to the ups and downs of the guitar. And it just becomes a smeary thing by nature. So I know this sounds convoluted as crap, but instead of it just being so animated, it's kind of like if I talk like this with the same volume and I didn't do anything with my voice, this is what we're doing with the compressor. We're making the guitar just talk so that it speaks words instead of talking like this, where there's breaths, expression, volume change. We don't want the guitar to do all that. We want to keep it more linear. So that's what we're doing here with this compressor. But also too, as a side consequence, this will pull up some of that reverb detail. So this is a trade-off. Let's hear it in context though. So what we need to do is up the release time very high. Pull the attack down. Different compressors give you different tones. So I think that's good. So what we're doing again is just kind of making the guitar less important. A couple more things we could do to make this real is we could do the same sample delay effect, which is like spread it left and right. This tends to make the ear not latch on to so many flaws in the sound. So that's my technique for this. Now I'm going to EQ this guitar, not that you guys have to, but this one has some bright frequencies around like 3K. That's usually where harshness exists, 3 to 4K, and sometimes around 600 or 800 hertz. That's where a lot of like buildup happens, and it's sharp to the ear. So we want to make sure we're taming this. I'm just going to do it automatically without even hearing it, just so we don't get too caught up in those frequencies. Because this is a very boxier kind of guitar. So pretty tame there. Another way to blend stuff in is add chorus or some type of detune effect. In this case, we'll just add chorus just to show you guys. So now it sounds like part of the effect. So that flaw becomes part of the creative sound. All right, so I think we've done enough. Now that's creative. So now everything has its own space. The bass is on the left and the right, so that lets the kick come straight up the middle and be punchy. The guitar's on the left and the right, and now we smeared some of that phasey weirdness into more of a creative perspective. And we also tame the guitar so it's not so jumpy. I really think that's all we have to really take care of. The other sounds, my ear doesn't even pick up on them. Like this keyboard. I didn't even notice that was there. Let's just turn the keyboard down. Because it's not an important sound. In fact, I thought that keyboard was part of the guitar. For this keyboard, actually, what I'll do is I do like the tone in terms of the frequencies of the keyboard, but I don't want it to be wide, meaning I don't want it to sound like far on the left and the right. We're gonna add an audio effect here called the direction mixer. Again, this is a rare thing that I'm about to do. This is not something you would do all the time. We're going to pull the left and the right to the center. So basically, instead of the keyboard sounding like it's this big, it's going to sound like it's this big. And it just becomes more of a support tone than a thing distracting our ear. Also, too, there's like some high frequencies in here. Let's add an EQ. We're going to use what's called the high shelf and just create a fade like this. because we don't need the high frequencies of the sound. It doesn't add any additional detail to the track, so there's no need for it. So the percussion sounds fine. Again, if we overly do stuff, sometimes it actually kills the entire picture. I've noticed that with Suno Studio, the less you do, usually the better. The more you start trying to correct what Suno did, the worse your stuff's going to sound. That's the one difference between Suno stuff and other stuff that I've mixed, is when that reverb is baked in and when that phase of the audio samples is baked in to like have its own like audio generation weirdness, you just can't undo it. So again, the best solution is usually to leave it as is, especially with vocals. That's where you can really do a lot, but make it worse. Let's listen to this percussion here. So the percussion is pretty straightforward. It's just like a clap slash snap. And it's already gated in terms of how they generated the audio, so we don't need to gate the audio. If anything, we can add an EQ just to boost up some lows so it kind of hits a little bit more and sounds more real. So let's just boost up what's called the fundamental frequency. This is the lowest frequency of a sound here. So with our drums, pardon me, the lowest frequency was around 70, where with these bongos, they're much lighter weight. And so the fundamental frequency is around 200 to 300 in this case, and not around 60 hertz and 70 hertz. So I'm going to boost this up. Now, I would also like this to have a little more density to it. In Pro Tools, I used to love their plugin called like Sub Harmonic. I don't think we have a generation tool inside of Logic Pro stock stuff. Actually, what is this? What's sub bass? Let me see what this is first. Okay, so this may be their solution to it, but I don't know. So because I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and try to guess what this does. But let's at least listen to it first. So I assume this is going to trigger I wonder how it triggers though. So I'm going to pull up an EQ to see if it's doing anything. Probably isn't doing anything. So there is some sub activity. So let's turn this off. So with it off, we see no sub frequencies around 50 or 70 hertz. If we turn it on, now we see the sub information. So we're adding frequencies that never existed on this sound. So I do like what it's doing in theory. The only thing I want to do is change the actual frequency. So I don't know what this frequency mix means. I guess that means just the volume of it. So now we got to figure out a way to take this 75 hertz and move it up to around 100 or 200 hertz. Again, I don't see anything on here that says 75, so that's why I'm kind of confused on where it adds the frequency. Okay, frequency mix it's a blend between the high frequency and the low frequency that it's adding in. Okay, so that's what it's doing. All right, so the center is 100. Let's move the center higher and pull up the wet level a little bit. Okay, so that you guys can hear that low end being added. So I'll exaggerate so we can hear. So we're adding frequencies that never existed in the recording. That's what we're doing. And this is going to help us with the density of the sound. So I learned a new technique showing you guys stuff. All right, so see how this is at 75? We want to turn this up, basically. So I guess you just half this number, whatever the center is, half this by 2. Hence, I guess, the ratio. All right, so let's say we want to boost that 200. Let's pull this up to about 400. And now we have more 200 hertz. The bandwidth is how wide. I think that sounds better to widen it. Let's pull this in. So it's very subtle, but it definitely adds a realism. Only thing I'm trying to figure out is how to change the gate of it. Okay, so the ratio is the octave. It's a little hard to understand like what frequencies it's targeting, so that is a little difficult to understand. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. But so I'm just going by ear. I'll exaggerate it though. Let's turn down the dry level. How about that? Now we can really hear what we're adding. That makes more sense. So this is all the frequency stuff we're adding. So it sounds crunchy because it's just the way they gate the audio. I do like lower tones, but let me hear what it sounds like in context though. And now let's go to the second zone and let's try to add the bottom end of the bongo. So this is, you really have to do it by ear. What helps is this graph. This is, again, we're doing stuff that I never normally do. This is like really specific. So the goal here is to create frequencies around 200 so that we can blend that in with the original so that it sounds a little more full. Now to blend this so that it doesn't sound like two different things happening, let's add a compressor. And I'm gonna go to FET mode, put soft clip on. Now this does change the tone of the drums, but I'm trying to blend the two random things into one thing. Now let's check the meters. I know I'm moving kind of fast here. So before, we're hitting at negative 1.5, it looks like. After the compressor, let's see where we're at. So now we're at 0, so we need to pull back about 2 dB or so. I'll just do 3. So let's see if this even like made a positive change. Let's listen to it before and then after. Here's before. Now let's turn the plugins on. I definitely think they have more realism. I'm going to do one more to make these sound more real, which is to add them to a space. So it does have more realism, I'll say. Oops. Here's before. It just sounds like a heavily gated recording. Here's after. It's a very subtle difference, nothing huge. Now, one more way to kind of make this sound realistic is we're going to click on where it says send. Let's send this to a bus. A bus is like, you know, a track is like kids. A bus is like a bus that has to go to a school. So the bus goes to a different, what we call an aux track. And here's where we can add different things. So the aux track is basically the metaphorical school. So the bus sends the kids to the school, and we can tell it how much of the kids we send to the school by turning up this knob right here. This is the amount that we send over. So we're basically duplicating this track over to what's called the bus, or we're using the bus, pardon me, to duplicate this track over to the aux channel. On the aux channel, this is where we're going to add a reverb. And I have so many reverbs that let's just go to reverbs and let's do Space Designer. I don't even know what this is. So let's do this one. We want a small room. So this looks like an impulse response reverb. So you guys can find impulse responses off the internet. Actually, I don't want to do an impulse response for now because let's do the Quantic Room Simulator. And I think this has presets. So we want to look for a small room, and we're going to send the bongos over to that small room. I'll exaggerate so you guys can understand. And also too, let me turn it up a little bit. There we go. So now we're adding like width and dimension to the bongos so they feel like they're from a room. So this room is nice to where it doesn't sound like you can barely tell that it's like separate. So I'm even cranking this all the way up, which I normally don't do, but it sounds fine. So let's hear it in the mix though. What I'll do is I'll turn the reverb on and off. So you really got to solo because it's really hard for the average ear to hear that, but it's such a subtle dimension change. So just listen to the wideness of the sound. See how it feels kind of straightforward and kind of pans to the right a little? Now let's add the reverb. Now you feel like you have stuff on the left. There's dimension to it. So we're just adding like a realistic dimension to it. So funny enough, we're trying to make stuff sound human. Okay. So perfect isn't even like what we want. We want humanness. So this already has reverb on it. We don't need to add anything to it. If I wanted to be creative with this little synth melody, you guys will get the project files too, by the way. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/black-bonus. And when you sign up, I'll give you access to the download vault where you guys can get the Logic Pro files for this track. So this one, there's nothing to do to it, nothing to edit. If anything, I like an effect called tape delay. And it just makes it bounce around a little bit more. Just gonna pull back the wet level a little bit. Also, I like messing with these flutter and LFO intensities. This adds like if I turn it to straight wet level, it goes like that. It kind of flutters like that. So we'll just pull this back. All right, let's hear this in context. So all it's doing is filling in the gaps when it's not playing. So that's where delay and reverb come in handy. So see how it goes, then it's like a big gap. So all we're doing really is just filling that gap with very subtle amounts of the same exact thing. Turn it down a little bit more. So our mix is pretty much done. Now, here's where you got to be really light-handed, especially when your mix is that, good. Individually, you don't want to add 1,000 plugins to the mix bus because here's where you can undo all that hard work you just did. So we're going to make very slight changes because the mix was so good, in my opinion, in terms of what we turned it into. So all we're going to do, boost the lows a little tiny bit. We may boost the highs. Let's hear it in context. Now, boosting the highs is going to make your sound feel taller. Boosting the bass just makes it feel more real and dense. My boost is like a small amount. So you can feel the weight. You can really feel the movement of that bass. So I'm a bass, that's my thing. So if we boost the highs, this is where that washiness is. So you don't want to boost this too much. So I'll exaggerate. Hear that washiness. So I'll show you guys a way to boost the highs, but also kind of get rid of the washiness. So I'm going to overly boost it here just to exaggerate. And we're going to go into what's called a de-esser. There are different de-essers. We're not going to use the Logic Pro one though. This is a very, 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 very specific de-esser. You don't need this. There's another plugin called Hi-Fal by Schwab Digital. So what I'm trying to do here is target those really, really high frequencies and just pull them down. So I'm boosting into the compressor so that it keeps everything linear, but I have all the frequencies filling the tone. It's almost like white noise going like tss. I just want to make sure it's even. So let's solo this real quick and we can hear these frequencies. So these are the frequencies we're targeting, like super, super high frequencies. Let me move this other one over. So hear all this metallicness in the sound. That's where the machine kind of overly does it because of the way the machine learning works. It's harder to identify the fundamentals of a sound than the upper harmonics of a sound because they don't clash as much. Whereas when you're training on a full song, sounds clash at certain frequencies. So you can't really tell what makes a violin or what makes a vocal because they all kind of line up in the same spot. Okay, so here, this is where machines kind of overly do it, is the highs. Okay, so let's pull this threshold down to compress these high frequencies because it's just overly doing this zone to where it sounds like very saturated and metallic. So pull it down until it just doesn't sound metallic. There's no magical solution. Just pull it down until it gets rid of that metallic tone. So yeah, I'm losing some details, but I'd rather my sound not sound metallic than to... Now, the only difference here is that now that we pushed into the de-esser, everything sounds like the transients kind of lose their punch. But again, that's a trade-off for that sharpness. So it's a compromise that we're making. So let's see if we even made it better. That's going to be your number one thing, is did it really make it better? Let's do a before and after. Here's before. I do like it. I think I was a little too heavy-handed though. I feel like this is the sweet spot for it, to where we have just enough transient, like pointiness, but it's not that harsh metallic sound. So again, there's definitely a trade-off that we're making there. Let's do it before and after, because this area is very high with dense with those hi-hats. So listen to the high frequencies. So I didn't realize this mix was very reliant on those high frequencies for the movement of the track. So we need to add movement back into the track because we've taken it out when we added the compressor. So here's where that expander comes into play. To be short about it, we're going to turn off the clipping mode so that it does not add a bunch of more frequency content. So here I'm just looking for 1 dB. We're not looking for a crazy amount of... So in this case, we're going to turn up the threshold, because we don't want to be overly pointy with our audio. We just want... So see how this is moving just barely? This is helping us create a groove without that hi-hat dominating the groove. So there's a definite trade-off. So here's before. The hi-hats are ruling the rhythm. It's ruling the groove. Then we took that. There's a compromise of movement in that case, so just understand that. Now, let's ask ourselves, was the metallic sound that annoying? To my current ear, it's not that annoying. Okay, so... Like I said, you guys, the hardest part at this point is fighting little details like that, little trade-offs, because it definitely shifts the entire perception of the track when we completely tame the high end, because then you're listening to a whole different element. All right, so I don't want to beat that down too much. Okay, so we have the EQ. What else do we have here? Let's also turn down the output here. Anytime we're clipping, we want to make sure we're just turning stuff down. Also, too, I forgot I boosted the highs. That probably added to the high frequencies going crazy. There we go. That's what I mean. Like, you can make a change and then not realize that one small thing changed everything. So just me turning that EQ off changed everything. That's why I said Suno comes out extremely balanced. So when you add anything, you need to understand how to rebalance it once you make a change. So if you boost the bass just a little bit, you need to understand that's going to make the track feel bass heavy. So I guess the consistent message I want to give you guys is Suno tends to balance stuff very well, but it loses the humanness because humanness likes that up and down. So when something's overly balanced, It sounds good in theory, but it lacks density and movement. Okay, so that's what we're adding to this track. So we have an EQ, we did the expander. Let's see if the expander sounds good with a hi-hat. So before it's just louder, so it's gonna sound different. I think this adds the smallest amount of dimension to the track. But what I have to do though is pull the volume back down so we're not going into clipping. Anytime this thing turns red, you're clipping. We're clipping by 0.5 dB. So I'm just going to pull this down to give us a little bit more room. Now, really, if we keep adding stuff, it's going to make it worse. So let's just open up a limiter here as our final piece to the puzzle. And the limiter's job is really just to make sure nothing goes past 0 for the most part. I'm going to turn up the look ahead speed just so it captures any peaks. And we're going to pull up the gain. Now you could do gain many different ways, but I'm just going to turn the gain up here instead of using this gain knob here. But you could use either or, the gain knob here or the output gain right here. So now if I want more volume, I'm just going to use the output gain here. Now with the limiter, anytime you go past 2 dB, I've noticed, or 3 dB, it really sounds like you're just, it goes like it's very pumpy. So to avoid that, you generally want to stick within 2 dB or 3 dB on your limiter. We're not pushing the limiter that hard. So I think this is the sweet spot for it. So I can see it's hitting past. So I'm going to add another limiter just to really make sure we're not going past 0. Because also too, when I speak, it's making the audio go past 0. So here's what I'm going to do to do a final test. We're going to print this track. Actually, we'll just, how can I do this? I guess I could print it with and without the effects on. So I'm going to pause the video, print both versions so you guys can hear before and after. All right, so I've also included ARIA mastering. So if you guys just want a simple solution to just run your stems through it, industry insiders definitely use ARIA mastering. So firstly, let's do the before. This is just straight out of Suno. The only thing I've added is a limiter just to make it not past 0. So there's a limiter technically on this. So just listen to the details, the dimension. So I'd say for that mix is very soft and powdery sounding. Okay, now here's the after our mixing, our first run of mixing. And then we'll compare it against ARIA mastering. See how that bass grips your ears and identity? See how that mix really stood out? It really grabbed your ear. The first one was like a nice powdery sound. It wasn't bad, it just sounded powdery. And here's ARIA mastering. This is straight from the raw. Our files that had the one limiter on it, this is that process through ARIA mastering. So it definitely has a little bit of high mid frequency focus on it. A little too heavily up there, but it looks like you can shift different things about this, like the high frequencies, the mix type. Let's see if this changes anything. I don't know if this is doing it in real time or if we have to redo it, but so it does a job. It definitely focuses by default. It's not their fault. It's because there was no mix to begin with, but it's making it very bright in that high mid to where it's almost like too loud to listen to. The horns jump out a little too much, but it is a nice sound. It's just a little too loud in that zone. So you would still have to kind of touch it up, in my opinion, but it's a nice service for those who just they don't want to learn mixing and you just want to get straight to it. ARIA mastering is a great tool. And also too, you can run your mixes through here to give it that final polish. Okay, so that's really what it's for. All right, guys, this is a long video. I need you guys to subscribe, like this video. And if you want a Suno Studio course, I'll leave a link below, or you guys can just go to busyworksbeats.com/black. All right, guys, peace out.